Sold to Vikings by her father, she becomes the most feared warrior of the North. Before we begin, let us know where you're listening from. After the story, rate it from 1 to 10. Now, let's start. The blade sang through the air, its edge catching the weak northern sun as it descended in a perfect arc. Britta Haraldsdottir moved like water, her body following the weapon as though they were one entity. The three men who surrounded her hesitated, their weapons held with uncertainty. She had already disarmed two others who now nursed broken wrists in the mud. "Come," she called, her voice carrying across the training ground. "Is this how the sons of Thor fight?" With fear in their hearts. The tallest of the men lunged forward, his axe swinging wildly. Britta sidestepped with grace, bringing her sword's pommel down hard upon his shoulder. He crumpled with a grunt. The remaining warriors backed away, bowing their heads in deference. "The Raven's daughter shows no mercy today," one muttered. Britta sheathed her sword, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. "The Saxons will show less," she replied, walking away as the men gathered their wounded pride along with their fallen comrades. From the edge of the training ground, Jarl Knut Runeson watched with approval in his eyes. His arms crossed over his broad chest, the intricate knotwork tattoos visible even beneath the light dusting of snow that had begun to fall. "You've trained her well," said Halvard, the Jarl's most trusted advisor, as he approached. "I cannot claim that honor," Kettil replied, his gaze never leaving Britta's retreating form. "She came to us already forged in fire. 8 winters with us, and still the men whisper when she passes." "Let them whisper," Kettil said. "As long as they follow when she leads." The snow fell heavier now, and both men turned toward the great hall where fires burned warm and mead would soon flow. Behind them, the sea crashed against the rocky shore, and longships pulled against their moorings like eager hounds straining at the leash. Spring would come soon. And with it, the raiding season. 8 winters earlier, the Saxon coast, 847 AD. Britta clutched her thin cloak around her shoulders as her father pushed her forward. The Viking ship loomed before them, its dragon-head prow seeming to leer at her in the dying light. "Father, please," she whispered, but Herrick Havelock only tightened his grip on her arm. "Silence, girl," he hissed. "Your sisters fetched a far lower price, and they went without complaint." Britta bit her lip until she tasted blood. At 16, she was the last of Herrick's 5 daughters, and the most defiant. While her sisters had accepted their fates as brides sold to whoever offered the most silver, Britta had fought, hiding in the forest for days until hunger drove her back. The Northmen stood at the shore, their leader tall and imposing. His beard was the color of fire touched with frost, and his eyes were as blue as the deepest part of the winter sea. "This is the one?" the Viking asked in broken Saxon. Herrick nodded eagerly. "Strong. Good for work. Good for breeding." Britta's stomach turned at her father's words. She was being sold like a prized mare, her worth measured only in the son she might bear. "She looks like she might run," the Viking observed, studying her face. "Chain her then," Herrick replied with a shrug. "It matters not to me, once I have your silver." The Viking leader approached, towering over Britta. He lifted her chin with one rough finger, forcing her to meet his gaze. "I am Jarl Knut Runeson," he said in his accented Saxon. "You understand my words?" Britta stared back defiantly, refusing to answer. The corner of Ketil's mouth twitched. "The spirit is good. We will see if it serves you among my people." He turned to her father, tossing him a small pouch that clinked heavily with silver. "If she displeases me, I will return for my payment in blood," Kettil warned. Herrick paled but clutched the pouch tightly. "She's yours now," he said, already backing away. "Do with her what you will." Britta watched her father retreat without a backward glance. A hollow feeling expanded in her chest, not quite grief, not quite rage, but something in between. "Come," Kettil said, gesturing toward the ship. "The tide turns soon." "I will not be your bed slave," Britta said, finding her voice at last. "I will drown myself first." The warriors nearby laughed, but Kettil did not. He studied her face with something like respect. "I did not buy you for my bed, Saxon girl. I have a wife who would feed your heart to the ravens if I did. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I bought you because I saw how you fought the men who tried to drag you to the market. 3 grown warriors, and you left one with a broken nose. Britta remembered the moment well. The satisfaction of feeling cartilage crunch beneath her fist had been worth the beating that followed. What use am I to you then? She asked warily. That depends on you, Kettle replied. In the north, a woman may be more than a husband's property. She may be a shield maiden, a trader, even a leader. He gestured to the ship. Or she may be a thrall, working until her hands bleed and her back breaks. The choice will be yours. Before Britta could respond, a shout came from down the beach. Riders approached, their torches burning bright against the gathering darkness. Saxon warriors, one of Kettle's men called. Many of them. Your father has betrayed us, Kettle said grimly, drawing his sword. He took my silver and called his lord's men. Britta felt a surge of bitter satisfaction. Her father had never intended to simply sell her, he had planned to reclaim the payment after the Northmen were slaughtered. The Viking warriors rushed to form a shield wall, but they were outnumbered. Kettle grabbed Britta's arm. If you run to them now, you might live, he said urgently. Tell them we forced you. Britta looked at the approaching Saxons. Among them she recognized Lord Elfric, a man who had eyed her hungrily since she was 14. Her father would sell her again, perhaps to him, perhaps to another. And next time, there would be no talk of choices or freedom. In one fluid motion, she snatched a dagger from Kettle's belt. Give me a sword, she said. Kettle's eyes widened. You would fight your own people. They are not my people, Britta replied coldly. My father sold me once. He will not have the chance to do so again. After a moment's hesitation, Kettle barked an order, and a sword was pressed into Britta's hands. It was heavier than she expected, but she gripped it firmly. Stay behind the shield wall, Kettle instructed. We fight our way to the ship. The battle was brief but brutal. The Saxons, expecting to slaughter unprepared raiders, instead met a disciplined Viking force. Britta fought with desperate fury, her sword finding its mark more by luck than skill. When a Saxon warrior broke through the line, recognizing her, his moment of surprise cost him his life as she drove her blade into his unprotected throat. By the time they reached the ship, the beach was littered with bodies. Britta's arms trembled with exhaustion, and blood, not all of it belonging to others, soaked her clothes. As the Vikings pushed the ship into the churning waves, Britta turned for one last look at the land of her birth. Her father stood on the shoreline, his face contorted with rage as he watched his daughter and the silver she had brought him sail away into the darkness. There is no returning now, Kettle said quietly beside her. You have killed your countrymen. Britta felt nothing but a cold resolve as she turned away from the receding shore. Good, she said. The journey north was long and miserable. Winter storms battered the longship, and icy spray soaked Britta to the bone. She huddled beneath a scrap of sailcloth, shivering violently as the ship rose and fell on massive waves. First time at sea? Asked a voice beside her. Britta turned to see a young woman with intricate braids woven through her blonde hair. Unlike the warriors, she wore no armor, but a sword hung at her hip, and her bearing was that of someone accustomed to command. Is it obvious? Britta replied through chattering teeth. The woman laughed. Only because you're the color of new snow. I'm Thyra, Kettle's sister. Britta, she offered, uncertain of the protocol. Was she meant to bow? To serve this woman? I know who you are, Saxon girl. My brother has told me of your choice on the beach. Thyra studied her with frank curiosity. It was brave. Or foolish. Perhaps both. I had no choice, Britta said. There is always a choice, Thyra replied. You could have returned to your father, taken your punishment, lived the life laid out for you. A life of servitude is no life at all. Thyra's expression softened slightly. And yet you come to be a thrall among the Northmen. Your brother spoke of other possibilities. Did he? Thyra raised an eyebrow. Ketil has strange ideas. He believes women can be warriors, can have power. Not all of our people agree. And you? What do you believe? Thyra's hand moved to the hilt of her sword. I believe we make our own fates, Saxon girl. The gods may weave the threads, but we choose how to follow the pattern. She stood, bracing herself against the ship's movement. If you wish to be more than a thrall, you must prove yourself worthy. It will not be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is, Britta replied. We'll see if you still believe that when we reach Ravholt. Ravholt, Ravenswood, was Ketil's settlement, nestled between towering pines and a deep fjord. As the longship approached, Britta saw smoke rising from dozens of buildings and people moving about like ants on the shore. The settlement was larger than she had imagined, with sturdy wooden buildings arranged around a central hall. Ships of various sizes were drawn up on the beach or anchored in the protected waters of the fjord. As they disembarked, children ran down to meet them, followed by women and older men. Ketil was greeted with respect, warriors clasping his forearm in welcome. Britta stood awkwardly to one side, painfully aware of her ragged appearance and the curious stares directed her way. A tall, statuesque woman approached Ketil, her red-gold hair gleaming in the weak sunlight. She wore a blue apron dress adorned with bronze brooches, and keys hung at her waist, symbols of her authority as the lady of the hall. Husband, she said, her voice cool but not unfriendly. Your journey was successful. Successful enough, Jida, Ketil replied, kissing her cheek. We have goods from the Saxon shore and only lost 2 men. Jida's eyes found Britta. And this? Another thrall for our household. Britta stiffened at the word, but kept her eyes downcast, remembering Thyra's warning that she would need to prove herself. This is Britta, Ketil said. She fought alongside us when we were betrayed by her kinsman. Jida's eyebrows rose slightly. A Saxon who fights against Saxons? Interesting. She circled Britta slowly, assessing her. She's strong enough, but knows nothing of our ways. I can learn, Britta said before she could stop herself. The crowd fell silent at her boldness. Thralls did not speak unless spoken to directly. Jida's lips thinned, but there was a glimmer of something like amusement in her eyes. Indeed? And what would you learn, Saxon girl? How to brew ale. How to weave. How to please a Norse husband. Britta met her gaze steadily. I would learn to fight. To sail. To be free. A murmur ran through the gathered crowd. Jida looked to her husband, who shrugged slightly, as if to say the decision was hers. Freedom is earned here, Jida said finally. You will work as a thrall until you have paid your price. Then we shall see what you are made of. She turned to an older woman nearby. Hilda, take her to the thrall's quarters. See that she's fed and clothed properly. As Britta was led away, she heard Ketil speak quietly to his wife. She killed 3 Saxon warriors on the beach, Jida. With no training. Then perhaps, Jida replied, she will survive her first winter with us. The life of a thrall was hard, but not as brutal as Britta had feared. She worked from dawn until dusk, tending livestock, helping in the kitchens, carrying water, and mending clothes. Her hands grew calloused, her muscles ached, but she never complained. In the evenings, when her work was done, she would slip away to watch the warriors train. Hidden in the shadows, she studied their movements, the way they balanced, the techniques they used with sword and axe and shield. One evening, as snow fell gently around the settlement, Britta was discovered by Thyra. You watch every day, Thyra said, making Britta jump. Why not join them? I'm a thrall, Britta replied bitterly. Thralls don't train with warriors. Not usually, no. Thyra sat beside her on the fallen log. But you did not come here to be usual, did you? Britta studied the Viking woman's face, searching for mockery but finding none. What would you have me do? Meet me here tomorrow before dawn, Thyra said, rising. Bring a stick about the length of your arm. When Britta arrived the next morning, Thyra was waiting with 2 wooden practice swords. "These are heavier than real swords," she explained, tossing one to Britta. "If you can move well with these, steel will feel light in your hands." That first morning, Britta could barely lift the practice sword above her shoulder. By the time the sun rose, her arms trembled with exhaustion, and sweat froze on her brow despite the bitter cold. "Same time tomorrow," Thyra said, seemingly untired by their session. "And the next day, and the day after that." "The mistress will notice if my work suffers," Britta protested. "Jida notices everything," Thyra replied with a small smile. "Why do you think she assigned you to feed the chickens at dawn? The coop is right behind here." Britta stared at her, realization dawning. "She knows. My brother's wife is no fool. She sees your potential, but you must earn your place. All of us had to, in our own ways." Day after day, Britta trained with Thyra before dawn, then completed her thrall's duties, often working through exhaustion that made her hands shake. At night, she collapsed onto her pallet, every muscle screaming, only to rise again in the darkness to train once more. Weeks passed, then months. Spring came to Ravholt, bringing with it longer days and preparations for the summer raids. Britta's body changed, growing stronger, leaner, more resilient. The practice sword that had once seemed impossibly heavy now felt like an extension of her arm. One morning, as they trained, Ketil appeared at the edge of the clearing. "Enough playing with sticks," he called. "The ice has broken in the fjord. The ships will sail within the week." Thyra lowered her practice sword. "She's not ready for a raid." "No," Ketil agreed, "but she's ready for real steel." He approached Britta, assessing her with a critical eye. "You've worked hard, Saxon girl. Harder than many born to our ways." "I want to earn my freedom," Britta said simply. "Freedom," Ketil repeated thoughtfully. "What would you do with it, if given?" Britta hesitated. She had asked herself this question many times over the long winter months. Return to Saxon lands? She would be executed as a traitor if recognized. Travel elsewhere? She had no coin, no connections. "I would stay," she admitted finally. "I would fight for Ravholt, for its people." She met his gaze steadily. "For you, who offered me a choice when my own father saw me only as goods to be sold." Ketil nodded slowly. "Tonight, you will join us in the Great Hall. Not as a thrall, but as a free woman of Ravholt." He smiled slightly at her stunned expression. "You have more than paid your price in sweat and determination." That evening, Britta stood before the assembled people of Ravholt in the Great Hall. The firelight gleamed on her newly washed hair, and she wore a simple blue dress that Jida herself had provided. Ketil raised his drinking horn. 8 months ago, this woman came to us as a thrall, sold by her own father. She chose to fight alongside us rather than return to a life of submission. His voice carried through the hall. She has worked without complaint, trained without rest, and proven her worth to Ravholt. He beckoned Britta forward. "From this day forward, Britta Haraldsdottir is a free woman among us. No longer a thrall, but one of our people." Murmurs of approval rippled through the hall. Ketil placed something cold and heavy in Britta's hands. Looking down, she saw a sword, not a practice weapon, but true steel, its hilt wrapped in leather, simple but well crafted. "Every free person must have a way to defend themselves and their people," Ketil said. "This is yours now." Britta's throat tightened with emotion she dared not show. "I will use it to protect Ravholt," she vowed. Later, as the celebration continued around her, Jida approached, 2 cups of mead in her hands. She offered one to Britta. "You are no longer my thrall," she said, "but I hope you will remain in our household. We could use another shield-maiden." Britta accepted the cup with surprise. "You would have me stay?" "My husband saw something in you on that Saxon beach," Jida replied. "I wasn't certain at first, but I see it now too." She smiled, a rare expression that transformed her stern features. "Besides, who else will train with Thyra at ungodly hours of the morning?" Britta laughed, the sound strange to her own ears after so many months of caution and restraint. I would be honored to stay, she said. Jida nodded, satisfied. Good. The men sail in 3 days. While they're gone, we will continue your training. By the time they return in autumn, you'll be ready to join the shield wall. As Jida moved away to attend to other guests, Britta caught Ketil watching her from across the hall. He raised his horn in salute, and she returned the gesture, a wordless acknowledgement of the path that had brought her here and the journey still ahead. For the first time since leaving Saxon shores, Britta felt something like belonging settle in her chest. She was no longer Britta Havelock, the unwanted daughter sold to strangers. She was Britta Haraldsdottir, named for the Jarl who had given her a chance at a different life. And she would make that life count. The years passed, and with each season, Britta's reputation grew. From shield-maiden to warrior, from warrior to leader, she proved herself in battles along the coasts of Francia, Saxony, and the lands of the Slavs. Her skill with sword and axe became legendary, and men who once scoffed at the idea of fighting alongside a woman now vied for places in her shield wall. By her 4th year in Ravholt, songs were being composed about the Raven's daughter, the Saxon-born shield-maiden whose raids never failed. Some whispered that the goddess Freya herself guided Britta's sword arm, while others claimed she had made a pact with Odin, trading her soul for victory in battle. Britta let them talk. Reputation was a weapon as powerful as steel in the north. In her 8th winter with the Northmen, as she approached her 24th summer, Britta had become Ketil's most trusted war leader. She commanded her own ship, a sleek longship named Skadi after the winter goddess, and led 40 warriors who followed her without question. Now, as spring approached once more, the Thing Assembly had been called, a gathering of all free people to discuss matters of importance before the raiding season began. Representatives from other settlements would attend, alliances would be formed, and decisions made about where the ships would sail when the ice retreated. Britta stood at the edge of the assembly ground, watching as people gathered. Her hand rested on the pommel of her sword, no longer the simple weapon Ketil had gifted her, but a finely crafted blade with a silver-inlaid hilt, taken from a Frankish lord whose land she had raided the previous summer. The Saxon who became more Norse than the Norse, said a deep voice behind her. Your fame spreads, Britta Haraldsdottir. She turned to see a man she didn't recognize. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair pulled back from a face marked by a scar that ran from temple to jaw. His eyes were a startling green, unusual among the Northmen. And you are, she asked, not bothering to hide her wariness of strangers. Knut Runeson, from Bjornholm, he replied with a slight bow. My father is Jarl Rune the Wise. Britta had heard of Bjornholm, a powerful settlement 3 days' sail to the north. Its warriors were said to be fierce, its ships many, its alliances strong. What brings Jarl Rune's son to our humble gathering? She asked. Knut smiled, revealing even white teeth. Alliance, he said simply. My father seeks to join forces with Ravholt for a great raid south. Before Britta could respond, horn sounded, calling the assembly to order. Ketil stood on a raised platform at the center of the field, his red-gold beard now streaked with silver, but his bearing as commanding as ever. We will speak more of this alliance, Knut said, inclining his head before moving toward the gathering. Britta watched him go, a strange uneasiness settling in her stomach. There was something about the way he had looked at her, not with the awe or wariness she had grown accustomed to, but with calculation, as if assessing a valuable prize. The Thing Assembly proceeded as it always did, with disputes settled, criminals sentenced, and plans discussed for the coming season. When Jarl Rune was introduced, a murmur went through the crowd. He was older than Ketil by perhaps a decade, his once dark hair now mostly grey, but his eyes, the same startling green as his son's, were sharp and alert. Friends, Rune began, his voice carrying easily across the field. For too long, our settlements have raided separately, competing for the same shores, the same riches. This year, I propose we join forces. He gestured expansively. Together, Bjornholm and Ravholt could field 15 ships, over 400 warriors. No Saxon shore could stand against us. No Frankish lord could buy us off. We could venture further than ever before, to the rich lands of Miklagard, perhaps, or the golden cities of Al-Andalus. Excited whispers spread through the crowd. Such a journey would bring wealth beyond imagining to those who survived it. And what does Bjornholm ask in return for this alliance? Ketil inquired, his tone neutral but his eyes watchful. Rune smiled. Only the strengthening of bonds between our people. My son, Knut, has no wife. I propose a marriage alliance, your most renowned warrior joined with my heir, binding our settlements through blood and oath. All eyes turned to Thyra, who stood near her brother. As Ketil's sister and a respected shield-maiden in her own right, she would be the obvious choice for such an alliance. Not my sister, Ketil said, surprising many. She has chosen not to marry. He turned, his gaze finding Britta in the crowd. I speak of Britta Haraldsdottir, the Raven's daughter. Britta felt as though the ground had dropped away beneath her feet. Marriage? To a stranger? The very fate she had fled in Saxon lands now pursued her here, in the place she had come to call home. The Saxon, someone called from the crowd, sounding incredulous. She has proven herself one of us in every way that matters, Ketil replied firmly. Her ship has brought more wealth to Ravholt than any other these past 3 years. She has earned her place among us 100 times over. Rune studied Britta with newfound interest. The famous shield-maiden, he mused. Yes, I see the wisdom in this. Such a union would be spoken of in sagas. He looked to his son. Knut? Do you accept this match? Knut's green eyes found Britta's across the assembly ground. The calculation she had seen earlier was now mixed with something else, appreciation, perhaps, or hunger. I would be honored, he said, to join with the Raven's daughter. The assembly erupted in excited chatter. A marriage between settlements was always cause for celebration, but one involving a warrior of Britta's reputation would be extraordinary. Britta stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. She had fought so hard for her freedom, had carved out a place for herself through sheer determination and skill, and now she was being traded away like a prized mare, just as her father had intended all those years ago. The bitter irony of it threatened to choke her. As the assembly dispersed, Britta strode directly to Ketil, rage building with each step. A word, Jarl, she said, her voice dangerously controlled. Ketil nodded, leading her away from the curious eyes of the crowd. When they were alone, Britta rounded on him. You sold me, she said, the words like poison on her tongue. Just like my father did. Ketil's expression hardened. It is not the same. Is it not? Traded for political advantage, without my consent or even my knowledge. You are a free woman, Britta. You can refuse. Can I? She challenged. And what happens to the alliance then? What happens to Ravholt's chances at the greatest raid in a generation? She laughed bitterly. You place me in a position where my refusal would harm everyone I care about. Ketil had the grace to look uncomfortable. I thought you would see the opportunity in this. Bjornholm is wealthy, influential. As Knut's wife, you would have power, status beyond what you could achieve here. I've never sought power, Britta said quietly. Only freedom. Sometimes they are the same thing, Ketil replied. With enough power, no one can take your freedom from you again. Britta turned away, staring out at the fjord where her ship waited, ready to sail as soon as the ice cleared. She had planned her raids meticulously, had dreamed of the glory and wealth she would bring back to Ravholt. When would this marriage take place, she asked finally. Before the ship's sail, Ketil said. In 3 weeks' time. 3 weeks. From warrior to wife in the space of a moon's turning. And if I agree to this, Britta said slowly, I want your word that I will still lead my ship this season. I will not be left behind to tend hearth and home while the men seek glory. Ketil hesitated. That would be for your husband to decide. Then I will make it clear to him before any vows are spoken, Britta said firmly. I am a shield-maiden first, a wife second. If he cannot accept that, there will be no marriage. Ketil studied her for a long moment, then nodded. I will speak with Rune and his son. But Britta, he placed a hand on her shoulder, this alliance could secure Ravholt's future for generations. Think of that before you refuse. As he walked away, Britta remained staring at the fjord, her thoughts as turbulent as the waters that crashed against the shore. Once again, her fate was being decided by men who saw her as a means to an end. But this time, she was not a helpless girl. This time, she had a sword and a name and the respect of warriors. This time, she would set her own terms. The great hall of Ravholt buzzed with voices as people gathered for the evening meal. Britta sat at the high table beside Thyra, picking at her food without appetite. You look like you're planning a murder, Thyra observed, pushing a cup of mead toward her. Drink. It helps. Britta took a long swallow. Your brother has sold me to Bjornholm. Not sold, Thyra corrected. Allied. There's a difference. It doesn't feel different. Thyra sighed, setting down her own cup. Marriage is political for people in our position, Britta. It always has been. Why do you think I refused every offer? I saw what would happen, my ship given to another, my sword hung on the wall, my life reduced to breeding sons for some Jarl's glory. And Ketil allowed your refusals. My brother respects me enough to let me choose my own path. Thyra gave her a significant look. As he respects you. Why do you think he's never suggested a match for you before now? He's had offers. Britta looked up in surprise. Offers? For me? Many, Thyra confirmed with a wry smile. The Saxon shield-maiden is quite the prize. Ketil rejected them all without even telling you. She leaned closer. Until now. Which means this alliance must be important indeed. Before Britta could respond, a commotion at the entrance to the hall drew their attention. Knut Runeson entered with several of his father's men, all richly dressed for the evening feast. As was customary, Ketil welcomed them, inviting Knut to sit at the high table, directly across from Britta. The younger Runeson took his seat with easy confidence, nodding politely to those around him. Britta Haraldsdottir, he said, his green eyes finding hers. Your reputation sails before you like a banner. As does yours, she replied coolly, though in truth she knew little about him beyond his parentage. Does it? He seemed amused. And what do they say of Knut Runeson in Ravholt? Britta took another sip of mead, buying herself time. They say you are your father's heir. That you have led successful raids against the Saxons. That you are skilled with an axe. She set down her cup. Beyond that, you are a mystery. As you are to me, he countered. Though I've heard the Skald sing of the Raven's daughter who fights like Freya herself. His gaze traveled over her face with undisguised interest. They failed to mention her beauty. Thyra made a small choking sound beside her, and Britta shot her a warning glance before responding. I found beauty to be of little use in a shield wall, she said. Skill matters more. True, Knut agreed, but we are not in a shield wall now. He reached for the mead pitcher, refilling both their cups. I would know more of the woman I am to marry. Will you walk with me after the meal? The night is clear, and the stars are bright over the fjord. It was a reasonable request, and refusing would be both churlish and counterproductive if she hoped to negotiate the terms of their potential union. Britta nodded her assent. A short walk, she agreed. I train at dawn. Knut's smile widened. As do I. The meal seemed interminable, with toasts and speeches and discussions of the upcoming alliance. By the time Britta could politely excuse herself, the moon had risen high over Ravholt, casting silver light across the settlement. Knut met her at the door of the hall, offering a fur cloak as protection against the night's chill. Britta accepted it with reluctant gratitude. Her own cloak was thin, designed for movement rather than warmth. They walked in silence toward the shore, their breath forming clouds in the cold air. The fjord stretched before them, its surface rippling under the moonlight, ice still clinging to its edges. You resent this match, Knut said finally, breaking the silence. Britta saw no point in dissembling. I do. Because I am not to your liking, or because you were not consulted? Because I have spent 8 years fighting for my freedom, only to find myself once again being traded for political advantage. Knut stopped walking, turning to face her fully. You think I do not understand what it means to have your life planned by others? To have your future decided in negotiations where your voice is not heard? He laughed shortly. I am a Jarl's son. My life has never been my own. Britta studied his face in the moonlight, seeing for the first time the tension around his eyes, the tightness in his jaw that spoke of controlled frustration. Then why agree to this match, she asked. Because my father commands it. Because Bjornholm needs this alliance. He hesitated, then added more quietly, and because when the Skald spoke of the fierce shield-maiden from Ravholt, I found myself intrigued by a woman who had forged her own legend. His honesty was unexpected, disarming. Britta looked away, her gaze finding the distant horizon where the sea met the sky. I will not give up my ship, she said. If we are to marry, you must understand that I will sail with the raiders come spring. I will not be left behind to wait and wonder. Knut was silent for a long moment. In Bjornholm, wives do not raid, he said finally. It is our way. Then perhaps this alliance is impossible after all, Britta replied, disappointment sharp in her chest despite her earlier resistance to the match. I didn't say I agreed with our ways, Knut added, surprising her. Only that they exist. He took a step closer. My mother was a shield-maiden before she married my father. She gave up her sword with bitterness that poisoned their union for many years. His expression was somber in the moonlight. I would not repeat that mistake. Hope flickered to life in Britta's chest. You would allow me to lead my ship? Not allow, Knut corrected. Acknowledge your right to do so. There is a difference. A smile tugged at his lips. Besides, the Skald say your raids are uncommonly successful. It would be foolish to ground a ship that brings wealth to its people. Britta found herself smiling in return, the tension that had knotted her shoulders beginning to ease. You are not what I expected, Knut Runeson. Nor you, Britta Haraldsdottir. He gestured toward the path that led back to the settlement. Shall we return? You mentioned early training, and I would not keep you from your rest. As they walked back toward the hall, their steps fell naturally into rhythm. The silence between them was no longer strained but companionable, filled with new possibilities neither had anticipated at the start of the evening. At the door to the women's quarters, Knut paused. Tomorrow, I would see this famous ship of yours, if you're willing. And perhaps you might show me how Ravholt warriors train. I'm curious to see if the methods differ from ours in Bjornholm. Britta nodded, surprised by her own eagerness to continue their conversation. After the morning meal, she agreed. Meet me at the docks. Knut bowed slightly, the gesture more playful than formal. Until tomorrow, then, Raven's daughter. As Britta watched him walk away, she found herself wondering if perhaps this marriage alliance might not be the prison she had feared, but rather a different kind of freedom, one where she was seen and valued for exactly who she had become. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the sky a pale blue that promised fair weather. Britta rose before the sun, training with Thyra as she always did, though her mind was distracted by thoughts of the day ahead. You're slow today, Thyra chided, easily blocking Britta's thrust. Your future husband keeping you awake with worry. Britta redoubled her efforts, forcing Thyra to retreat several steps. Not worry, she admitted, circling warily. Confusion, perhaps. Oh. Thyra raised an eyebrow, parrying Britta's next attack. Do tell. Not what I expected. Britta feinted left, then struck right, catching Thyra's practice sword with enough force to send vibrations up both their arms. He says he won't stop me from raiding. Thyra lowered her weapon, surprising Britta. That's unusual. Especially for a man from Bjornholm. They're known to be traditional in their views of women. He claims his mother was a shield-maiden who gave up her sword unwillingly. He doesn't wish to repeat that mistake. Interesting. Thyra's expression was thoughtful. Perhaps my brother chose better than I thought. After training, Britta bathed quickly in the steam house, donning her everyday clothes, woolen trousers, a long tunic belted at the waist, and her usual sword. She braided her hair in the Norse style she had adopted years ago, the intricate pattern keeping it secure during training or battle. Knut was waiting at the docks as agreed, dressed similarly in practical clothes rather than the finery he had worn the previous evening. He was speaking with one of the shipwrights, his expression animated as they discussed something about the vessel under construction nearby. He turned as Britta approached, and the smile that spread across his face seemed genuine. "Britta," he greeted her. "I was just admiring your shipbuilder's work. The curve of this hull is masterful." "Ravholt ships are known for their speed," she replied, pleased by his appreciation of her settlement's craftsmanship. "Which is your vessel?" Knut pointed to a longship anchored further out in the fjord, its prow carved into the shape of a snarling wolf. "Garm," he said. "Named for the hound that guards the gates of hell." "An ambitious name," Britta observed. "She's earned it," Knut replied with evident pride. 3 summers raiding, and never a defeat. He gestured toward the line of ships drawn up on the shore. "And which is yours?" Britta led him to where Skadi waited, her sleek hull gleaming in the morning light. Like all Ravholt ships, she was built for speed, with a shallower draft than many longships, allowing her to navigate rivers that others could not enter. "She's beautiful," Knut said, running an appreciative hand along the smooth wood of the gunwale. "How many does she carry?" 40 warriors, plus supplies for a month's journey." Britta couldn't keep the pride from her voice. "We've raided as far south as Francia, and as far east as the Slav settlements." Knut nodded, studying the ship with a professional eye. "She's well built for coastal raids. Quick in and out, with enough speed to outrun pursuers." He glanced at Britta. "A ship suited to her captain's tactics, I imagine." Britta smiled despite herself. "You've heard of my methods. The Skalds say the Raven's daughter strikes like lightning, unexpected, devastating, and gone before the thunder follows." His green eyes crinkled at the corners. "They say you prefer speed and surprise to prolonged engagements." "It preserves the lives of my warriors," Britta acknowledged. "And brings more wealth back to Ravholt. Dead men claim no treasure." "A wise approach," Knut said. "Though different from our ways in Bjornholm. We favor direct confrontation." "You mean you enjoy the fighting more than the raiding?" Britta translated, amused. Knut laughed, the sound rich and unexpected. "Perhaps. Though I'll not admit that to my father, who counts every piece of silver with loving care." They spent the morning touring the settlement, Britta showing Knut the training grounds, the forge where weapons were made and repaired, the shipyard where new vessels took shape under skilled hands. Everywhere they went, people greeted Britta with respect and regarded Knut with cautious curiosity. By midday, they had worked up an appetite, and Knut suggested they find somewhere to eat. Britta led him to a quiet spot overlooking the fjord, where a fallen tree provided natural seating. She had brought bread, cheese, and dried meat from the kitchens, a simple meal they shared as they watched ships moving on the water below. "You are well respected here," Knut observed, breaking the comfortable silence that had fallen between them. "I've earned it," Britta replied. "Not through birth or marriage, but through my own actions." "And you fear losing that respect if you become my wife?" It wasn't a question, but Britta answered anyway. "Yes." Knut was quiet for a moment, chewing thoughtfully. "In Bjornholm," he said finally, "there is a woman named Ingrid. She was a famous shield-maiden in her youth, led many successful raids." He glanced at Britta. "She married my father's brother, gave up her sword as our custom demands." "And?" Britta prompted when he paused. "And she withered," Knut said simply. "Like a plant without sunlight. Within 2 winters, she was unrecognizable, not in face or form, but in spirit. The fire that had made her legendary simply went out." He turned to face Britta fully. "I would not see that happen to you." The sincerity in his voice caught Britta off guard. "Why should you care? You barely know me." "True," Knut acknowledged. But I know enough to recognize that your spirit is what makes you who you are. To extinguish that would be a crime against the gods themselves. He smiled slightly. Besides, what glory is there in taming a wildfire? Better to let it burn and warm yourself in its light. Britta studied him, trying to reconcile this thoughtful man with the calculating stranger she had first perceived. Your father may not agree with your views, she pointed out. My father respects strength, Knut replied. Show him yours, and he will accept you on your terms, not his. And if he doesn't? Knut's smile turned wolfish. Then we will give him no choice. I am his only son, his heir. He needs this marriage as much as Ketil does. He reached out, hesitating just short of touching her hand. Together, Britta Haraldsdottir, we could forge a new kind of alliance, one based on mutual respect, not mere political advantage. His words painted a future Britta had not allowed herself to imagine, a partnership of equals, each strong in their own right, stronger still together. It was seductive in its possibility. I still barely know you, she said, though the protest sounded weak even to her own ears. Then let us remedy that, Knut suggested. We have 3 weeks before the wedding. Time enough to learn if we can truly be allies, not just spouses. He offered his hand, palm up, not demanding, but inviting. After a moment's hesitation, Britta placed her hand in his, feeling the calluses that spoke of a life spent with weapons and ships, not unlike her own. Allies, she agreed. For now. Knut's fingers closed gently around hers, warm despite the chill in the air. For now, he echoed, and something in his tone suggested he hoped for more, given time. As they sat together overlooking the fjord, Britta found herself wondering if perhaps fate had not betrayed her after all, but instead had offered an unexpected gift, a chance at a future where she need not choose between her freedom and her heart. The 3 weeks before the wedding passed in a whirlwind of activity. Preparations for both the marriage feast and the upcoming raid occupied every moment of daylight, and often stretched into the evening hours. Ships were readied, weapons sharpened, supplies gathered and stored. Through it all, Britta and Knut found time to learn more of each other. They trained together in the mornings, their different fighting styles complementing rather than conflicting. They walked along the shore in the evenings, sharing stories of raids past and dreams of voyages future. Britta learned that Knut had a quick mind and a quicker laugh, that he valued loyalty above all other virtues, that he could recite skaldic poetry from memory and had once rescued a wolf cub, raising it until it was strong enough to return to the wild. Knut discovered that Britta had a talent for languages, speaking not only Norse and her native Saxon but also fragments of Frankish and Slavic tongues learned during her raids. He found that she could navigate by the stars with uncanny accuracy, that she whittled intricate figures from wood when troubled, and that beneath her warrior's exterior lay a deep compassion for those under her protection. 5 days before the wedding, Jarl Rune arrived with the remainder of the Bjornholm delegation. The great hall of Ravholt was filled to bursting that evening, as both settlements gathered to finalize the alliance. Rune was a formidable figure, taller even than his son, with the same striking green eyes but none of Knut's warmth. He greeted Ketil with formal courtesy, clasping forearms in the traditional manner, before turning his attention to Britta. So, he said, his voice deep and resonant, this is the famous Raven's daughter. His gaze traveled over her with frank assessment. You are smaller than I expected. Britta met his stare evenly. Yet somehow, I've managed to separate many large men from their lives. A ripple of nervous laughter went through the hall. Such boldness to a visiting Jarl was unusual, particularly from a woman. But Rune's stern expression cracked, a reluctant smile appearing beneath his silver-streaked beard. Well said, he acknowledged. My son tells me you lead your own ship. That you've never lost a raid. Your son speaks truth, Britta replied. Skadi and her crew have brought wealth and honor to Ravholt for 4 summers. Rune's eyes narrowed slightly. And after the wedding? What then? The hall fell silent, everyone aware of the critical nature of this exchange. Britta felt Knut tense beside her, ready to intervene, but she placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. After the wedding, she said clearly, her voice carrying through the hall, Skadi and her crew will sail with the raiding fleet, as always. With me at her helm. Murmurs broke out among the Bjornholm contingent. One of Rune's advisors leaned forward, whispering urgently in the Jarl's ear, but Rune waved him away. In Bjornholm, he said, his tone carefully neutral, wives do not lead raids. In Ravholt, Britta countered, warriors who have proven themselves are not kept from battle, regardless of their marriage status. She straightened, meeting his gaze without flinching. I was not born to your ways, Jarl Rune, nor will I be bound by them. I come to this alliance as a shield-maiden of Ravholt, and so I will remain. The tension in the hall was palpable. Men on both sides shifted uneasily, hands drifting toward weapon hilts. This was the moment when the carefully negotiated alliance might shatter like ice in spring. Knut stepped forward, positioning himself not between Britta and his father, but at her side. The significance of the gesture was lost on no one. Father, he said respectfully but firmly, when you sent me to secure this alliance, you tasked me with bringing Ravholt's most valuable warrior into our family. That warrior stands before you, sword in hand, not spindle. He gestured toward Britta. Would you have me turn a falcon into a hen? What glory would there be in that? Rune's expression remained impassive, but Britta thought she detected a glimmer of something, pride, perhaps, in his eyes as he regarded his son. The girl has spirit, I'll grant her that, he said finally. And you, my son, show unexpected wisdom. He turned to Ketil. Your raven's daughter may keep her ship, her sword, and her raids, provided she brings equal glory and wealth to Bjornholm as she has to Ravholt. The hall erupted in cheers and relieved laughter. Ketil stepped forward, clapping Rune on the shoulder with more familiarity than he had shown before. To our alliance, he declared, raising his drinking horn. May it bring prosperity to both our settlements. As the celebration began in earnest, Britta felt Knut's hand find hers beneath the table. Well done, he murmured, leaning close so only she could hear. You've impressed him, which is no small feat. We've impressed him, Britta corrected. Together. Knut's fingers tightened around hers. The first of many battles we'll win as allies, I think. Britta smiled, allowing herself to relax for the first time since Rune's arrival. The first of many, she agreed. Across the hall, she caught Thyra watching them, a knowing smile playing about her lips. Britta raised her drinking horn in salute, acknowledging what her friend had seen before she herself had been willing to admit, that this arranged marriage might become something far more valuable than a mere political alliance. It might become a true partnership, forged in mutual respect and shared purpose. And perhaps, in time, even love. The day of the wedding dawned bright and clear, the sky a brilliant blue that promised good fortune according to the old women of the settlement. Britta stood in Jaida's chambers, uncharacteristically nervous as the older woman helped her dress for the ceremony. Stop fidgeting, Jaida chided, adjusting the brooches that secured Britta's apron dress. You face Saxon warriors without flinching, but a wedding has you trembling like a leaf. In battle, I know what to expect, Britta replied. This is unfamiliar territory. Jaida's expression softened. Marriage is a kind of battle, in its way. One fought not with swords but with patience, understanding, and compromise. She stepped back, surveying her work with a critical eye. Though from what I've seen, you and the Runeson boy have already mastered the first skirmishes. Britta smoothed her hands over the deep blue wool of her dress, a gift from Ketil, dyed with precious woad imported from distant lands. Around her neck hung a necklace of amber and silver, and her hair had been elaborately braided with silver threads woven throughout. I never thought to marry, she admitted. After what my father did. Some wounds run deep, Jaida acknowledged. But you are not the girl who was sold anymore, Britta. You are a woman who chooses her own path. She took Britta's hands in hers. And today, you choose to walk it alongside a man who sees your strength as an asset, not a threat. Thyra entered, already dressed for the ceremony in a green gown that complemented her fair coloring. She carried a small wooden box, which she presented to Britta with uncharacteristic solemnity. A wedding gift, she explained. From me and my stubborn brother, who would never admit to sentiment but insisted on contributing to this all the same. Britta opened the box to find a delicate circlet of silver, designed to be worn around the head. The metal was worked into the shape of ravens in flight, their wings touching to form the circle. "It's beautiful," Britta breathed, lifting it carefully from its bed of linen. "A symbol of your place among us," Thyra said as she helped place the circlet on Britta's head. "The Raven's daughter, now and always, no matter whose name you carry." Emotion threatened to overwhelm Britta, but she mastered it, embracing both women with fierce gratitude. "Thank you," she said simply. "For everything." A horn sounded from outside, signaling that it was time. Britta took a deep breath, centering herself as she would before battle. Then, with Thyra and Jida flanking her, she stepped out to meet her future. The wedding ceremony took place at the sacred grove just beyond the settlement, where ancient trees formed a natural cathedral. The entire population of Ravholt had gathered, along with the visitors from Bjornholm, forming a circle around the central space where a flat stone served as an altar. Knut waited there, dressed in a fine tunic of deep green embroidered with silver thread. His hair was neatly braided, and a sword hung at his hip, the same one he carried into battle, not a ceremonial weapon. When he saw Britta approaching, his face lit with a smile that reached his eyes, genuine and warm. The ritual itself was ancient and simple. Ketil, as Britta's adopted family, presented her to Jarl Rune, who accepted her into the Runeson clan. Rings were exchanged, simple bands of silver that they would wear always, even in battle. Vows were spoken, not of obedience or submission, but of loyalty, honor, and mutual support. "I, Knut Runeson, take you, Britta Haraldsdottir, as my wife and shield companion," Knut declared, his voice strong and clear. "I pledge to honor your strength, to respect your wisdom, to fight at your side and guard your back in battle. May the gods witness my oath, your enemies shall be my enemies, your triumphs my triumphs, your sorrows my sorrows, from this day until I feast in Valhalla." Britta's response came from her heart, not from the traditional words she had been taught. "I, Britta Haraldsdottir, take you, Knut Runeson, as my husband and shield companion. I pledge to honor your courage, to respect your counsel, to fight at your side and guard your back in battle. May the gods witness my oath, your path shall be my path, your hall my hall, your people my people, from this day until I feast in Valhalla." The priestess, an older woman with knowing eyes and hands gnarled from decades of service to the gods, bound their joined hands with a length of finely woven cord, symbolizing the binding of their fates. Blood from a small cut on each of their palms mingled on the altar stone, a sacrifice to the gods who witnessed their union. "What the gods have joined, let no mortal sunder," the priestess intoned. "Go forth now as one household, one shield wall, one destiny." A great cheer went up from the assembled crowd as Knut drew Britta into a kiss that started as ceremonial but quickly deepened into something more genuine. When they parted, both were slightly breathless, and Britta was startled to realize that the racing of her heart had nothing to do with nerves and everything to do with the man whose hand still clasped hers. The celebration that followed was legendary even by Norse standards. Mead and ale flowed freely, great haunches of meat turned on spits over open fires, and musicians played until their fingers blistered. Warriors from both settlements competed in friendly contests of strength and skill, while skalds composed verses celebrating the union of the Raven's daughter and the Wolf of Bjornholm. As the night deepened, Britta found herself seated beside her new husband at the high table, watching the revelry with a sense of contented disbelief. The girl who had been sold by her father had become a woman who had forged her own fate, who had earned respect through strength and skill, who had found an unexpected ally in a marriage she had initially resisted. "What are you thinking?" Knut asked, his voice low and intimate despite the noise around them. Britta turned to him, studying his face in the firelight. "That fate has strange turns," she admitted. 8 years ago, I was dragged onto a Viking ship, certain my life was over. Now I command my own vessel, raid foreign shores, and have married a Jarl's son who respects my sword arm." Knut smiled, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. "And I have married the most feared shield-maiden in the north, who once killed 3 Saxon warriors with no training at all." His expression grew more serious. We begin our journey together in 5 days, when the ships sail. Are you ready? For the raid? Always. For what comes after, Knut clarified. For building a life together between 2 settlements, 2 traditions. Britta considered the question carefully. I think, she said finally, that we who have chosen to forge our own paths rather than follow those laid out for us are well suited to creating something new. She met his gaze steadily. I am ready to try, if you are. Knut's answer was to lean forward and capture her lips with his, a kiss that promised much and demanded nothing. When they parted, the hall had grown noticeably quieter, and Britta became aware of knowing looks and suppressed laughter around them. I believe, Ketil announced, rising to his feet with exaggerated formality, that it is time for the bride and groom to retire. He winked at Britta. Unless, of course, the Raven's daughter intends to train at dawn as usual. Laughter rippled through the hall. Britta felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she met her mentor's teasing with a raised chin. Perhaps not at dawn, she conceded, to more laughter and cheers. Knut stood, offering his hand to help her rise, a courtesy, not a necessity, and one she accepted in the spirit it was given. Together, they made their way through the crowd, accepting good wishes and bawdy advice with equal grace, until they reached the small house that had been prepared for them at the edge of the settlement. Inside, furs and blankets made a comfortable bed, and a fire burned low in the hearth, casting golden light across the simple furnishings. A table held bread, cheese, and mead, refreshment for later, should they desire it. Alone at last, they regarded each other with sudden shyness, the confidence they showed in public giving way to the uncertainty of this new, intimate territory. We don't have to, Knut began. I want to, Britta interrupted, then smiled at her own boldness. That is, if you do. Knut's answering smile was slow and warm. Since the moment I saw you at the Thing assembly, he admitted, standing apart from the others, your hand on your sword hilt, watching everything with those clear, assessing eyes. He stepped closer, his hands coming to rest lightly on her waist. But there is no rush, Britta. We have a lifetime ahead of us. Britta reached up, her fingers tracing the line of the scar that ran down his face. How did you get this? She asked. Raiding in Francia, 3 summers ago, Knut replied. A monastery guard with surprising skill. Did you kill him? Eventually, Knut said with a small smile. Though he gave me something to remember him by, as you can see. Britta's fingers continued their exploration, moving from his scar to the curve of his jaw, the softness of his beard, the warmth of his lips. Knut stood perfectly still, allowing her to set the pace of their discovery. I have scars too, she said quietly. I know. Knut's hand came up to cover hers, pressing it against his cheek. Some visible, some not. As do I. His green eyes held hers, serious now. We are warriors, you and I. Our bodies tell the stories of our battles. And now our stories join, Britta murmured. Yes, Knut agreed, bending to press his forehead against hers. Now our stories join. When their lips met this time, there was no audience to perform for, no traditions to fulfill. There was only a man and a woman who had found in each other an unexpected match, equals in strength and spirit, each made more complete by the other's presence. Later, as they lay together beneath the firs, Britta's head resting on Knut's chest, she listened to the steady beating of his heart and marveled at the strange turns of fate that had brought her here. From a Saxon girl sold to Vikings by her father, to the most feared shield-maiden of the north, now married to a man who valued her warrior spirit as much as her woman's heart. What are you thinking now? Knut asked drowsily, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. Britta smiled in the darkness. That tomorrow, we should definitely train at dawn, she said. After all, the ships sail in 5 days, and I have a reputation to maintain. Knut's laughter rumbled beneath her ear, warm and rich. As you wish, wife, he said. Though I warn you, Bjornholm warriors fight differently than those of Ravholt. You may find yourself surprised. I look forward to it, Britta replied, settling more comfortably against him. After all, I've always enjoyed a challenge. As sleep claimed them, Britta's last thought was that perhaps being sold to the Vikings had not been a curse after all, but the beginning of a journey that had led her exactly where she was meant to be. 5 days later, 15 longships set sail from the fjord, their dragon-headed prows cutting through the waves like knives through butter. At the helm of Skadi stood Britta, her hair braided for battle, her shield on her arm, her husband at her side. Below decks, warriors from both Ravholt and Bjornholm manned the oars, their strength combined, their purpose unified. On the shore, those who remained behind, the very young, the very old, those needed to tend the settlement, raised their voices in songs of farewell and prayers for safe return. As the ships cleared the mouth of the fjord and entered the open sea, Britta felt the familiar exhilaration of setting out on a raid. But this time, there was something more, a sense of rightness, of completeness that she had never experienced before. She glanced at Knut, who stood watching the horizon with keen anticipation, and found him already looking at her, a smile playing about his lips. "Ready, Raven's daughter?" he asked. Britta nodded, turning her gaze back to the sea that stretched before them, full of promise and possibility. "Ready, Wolf of Bjornholm," she replied. "Let us write our saga together." And as the wind filled their sails and carried them toward distant shores, Britta Runeson, once sold to Vikings by her father, now the most feared warrior of the North, knew that her greatest adventures were just beginning. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please rate it from 1 to 10 and let us know where you're listening from. Thank you.